And it was, you know,
What's his name? What to put his name on the air?
Where does he live? Saying his name.
Yeah.
You probably get to see him on CNN.
Yeah, of course. I love those guys.
But you know, but it is that you don't say America with an intensity. You don't say England with an intensity. You know, you don't say the army with an intensity.
Carter.
But you say these names because you want that word to carry weight. You want it to leave something with
it has a cultural meaning, not just
exactly meaning. So it's you know it's said with a deeper voice.
We must recognize that these systems of oppression are linked. As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it. This is the question that we are always asked, how come we're not compromising? I mean, compromise has brought us here. Compromise has brought the kind of oppressive system that allows for someone like George Floyd to get the life stifled out of him for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So what the question should be that you should ask the Senate Republicans and even our Senate counterpart in Congress is to say, how come you are not negotiating with them? How come you are not listening to the voices that have been marginalized for decades and centuries in this country? How come you are not listening to the cries of the mothers and the fathers in our communities? How come you are not listening to the people who are telling you that we don't feel like our lives matter equally in this country? Because when you have legislators who are living every single day in the midst of communities that are constantly feeling pain, being told by legislators who have no idea, not a single idea, not because they've lived through it or because they represent people living through it, constantly telling them what should be and what can be acceptable treatment for themselves and for the communities that they represent. And I just think that is really the most emblematic part of this conversation. And it's truly why we continue to have a system that isn't equal for us. When we saw the statue of Columbus come down, there was conversations happening about how other people felt. And nothing was being amplified by the people who took it down, who saw it as a symbol of oppression for themselves. And so when do we as a society uplift and uphold the pain and the struggles of the people who are actually living through a system that doesn't recognize them as equal, a system that doesn't recognize the systematic trauma that they have been through, a system that doesn't recognize the continued pain and invisibility and lack of care that they feel every single day.
But right now, the Democratic Party is governed and led by the extreme left, by the Squad, by AOC and Tlaib and Omar, whose statements might as well be issued on behalf of Hamas. They are accusing Israel of engaging in terrorism, defending your citizens from violent terrorist attacks is the right of Israel. The disasters on the policy front, racking up one after the other. We have a border crisis on our southern border, an absolute disaster because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won't enforce the law. We have gas lines across the country because of their failed energy policies and their failure to protect critical infrastructure. We have a burgeoning inflation crisis that is hitting people across the country and especially seniors. And now we have a shooting war in the Middle East. Every one of these is caused by mistaken and disastrous political decisions from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Just 6 months ago, the world was very different. Just 6 months ago, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Just 6 months ago, America was the leading producer of oil and natural gas and an energy superpower on the global stage. And just 6 months ago, peace was flowering throughout the Middle East. The Abraham Accords were historic peace agreements between Israel and her Arab neighbors. And they were the result of strong and clear policies from the Trump administration. Two decisions in particular by President Trump set the stage for the Abraham Accords. Number one, the decision to move our embassy to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel, which President Trump made. Presidents of both parties had promised to do that. Presidents of both parties had broken that promise. I was there in Jerusalem when we opened the embassy. And it was a clear and unequivocal statement to our friends and to our enemies that America stands resolutely with Israel. And then secondly, that same week, President Trump withdrew America from the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal. The single most important national security decision made by President Trump. Those two decisions set the stage for the Abraham Accords. When the Abraham Accords were signed at the White House, I was there. I spoke with the ambassadors and foreign ministers from the UAE and from Bahrain. Both said virtually the identical thing. Both said, it is now clear to us that America stands unequivocally with Israel. We want to be friends with America. Therefore, we will be friends with Israel. That clarity, that strength produces peace. What did Joe Biden do? He came in and immediately began undermining Israel. He immediately began sending hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority, which is in bed with Hamas terrorists. And he set as his number one foreign policy goal re-entering the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal and sending billions of dollars to the Ayatollah Khamenei, who chants death to America and death to Israel. As a direct result of those failed decisions, we now have hundreds and hundreds of rockets raining down on innocent men, women, and children in Israel from Hamas, funded by Iran. The Biden administration's mistakes produced this crisis. And what is Joe Biden doing today? Today, he called Prime Minister Netanyahu not to say America stands with Israel, not to say we have your back, not to say you have a right to defend yourself against terrorism, but instead a tough call, as the administration is now proudly trumpeting, where President Biden condescended and lectured to Prime Minister Netanyahu and urged him to stop defending Israel against the terrorists. Let me be clear. There is no moral equivalency between terrorists murdering innocent civilians and a sovereign nation defending itself against those terrorists. Some years ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu put it powerfully when he observed the difference between Israel and Hamas. They use their citizens to protect their missiles. We use our missiles to protect our citizens. And Hamas regularly stores missiles in kindergartens, in hospitals. They use human shields. And what do the Democrats do? The Democrats act as their press agents. The Democrats spread propaganda because human shields are all designed locating military assets where innocent Palestinian civilians are likely to be the inadvertent targets of any act to strike back against the terrorists. It is Hamas that is killing these human shields. And the Democrats and the press are happily parroting that propaganda language. Several years ago, I led a bipartisan resolution that passed unanimously in the Senate condemning the use of human shields as a war crime. It is a war crime. But right now, the Democratic Party is governed and led by the extreme left, by the Squad, by AOC and Tlaib and Omar, whose statements might as well be issued on behalf of Hamas. They are accusing Israel of engaging in terrorism, defending your citizens from violent terrorist attacks is the right of Israel. And I will say for every Senate Democrat, they have an opportunity right now to decide where do they stand. Just a minute ago, I was speaking with a reporter who relayed that Chuck Schumer had told him, I don't want to answer any questions on Israel. Well, I bet he doesn't.